You wake up, and for a few quiet seconds, your mind still belongs to you. No emails yet. No headlines. No opinions. No pressure from the outside world telling you who you are, what you should fear, or what you should chase today. But for many people, that quiet moment disappears almost instantly. The hand reaches for the phone. The screen lights up. A message, a news alert, a social media post, a comparison, a problem from yesterday. And before the feet even touch the floor, the mind has already been handed over to the world. This is where most people lose the day. Not at noon when stress becomes heavy. Not in the afternoon when work becomes demanding. Not at night when exhaustion finally catches up. They lose it at the beginning, because the mind is always listening. It is always receiving instructions. The only question is, who is giving those instructions? Is it you, or is it the world? Welcome to Stoicism Breath. Stoicism does not begin with controlling everything around you. It begins with controlling what happens within you. Not your circumstances. Not other people. Not the timing of events. But your response. Your interpretation. Your first inner command of the day. And that command often begins with words. Not complicated speeches. Not perfect motivational quotes. Just a few clear words repeated with discipline. Words that tell your mind where to look, how to stand, and how to respond when pressure arrives. Because your words do not disappear. They build. Every thought you repeat leaves a mark. Repeat it long enough, and that mark becomes a pattern. That pattern becomes a habit. And eventually, that habit becomes part of your identity. If you repeat doubt every morning, you train hesitation. If you repeat fear, you train avoidance. If you repeat resentment, you train tension. But if you repeat control, clarity, patience, and purpose, you begin training stability. This is why two people can face the same difficult situation and respond completely differently. One person breaks down, reacts, complains, and loses focus. Another person pauses, breathes, thinks, and moves with control. The difference is not that one has an easier life. The difference is conditioning. Long before the pressure appeared, one mind had been trained to react. The other had been trained to respond. Most people never notice this because their thoughts feel automatic. They assume, this is just who I am. I'm anxious. I'm impatient. I overthink. I get triggered easily. But what feels automatic is often just something repeated too many times to question. Your brain does not stop and ask, is this thought useful? Is this thought true? Is this thought helping me become stronger? It records. It repeats. It follows the road you keep walking. That is why someone can live in self-doubt for years without realizing they practiced it every single day. And it is also why someone can become calm in chaos, not because they were born calm, but because they trained their internal world with intention. And the morning is where this training begins. Not because morning is magical, but because morning is unclaimed. Before the noise enters, before the world demands your attention, before the day starts pulling you in every direction, there is a small window where your mind is still neutral. What enters first sets the direction. If the first thing you feed your mind is noise, your day becomes reaction. If the first thing you feed your mind is intention, your day begins with structure. This is why starting your morning without awareness is not harmless. It is surrender. Because something will fill that space. If you do not choose it, the world will choose it for you. Notifications will choose it. Headlines will choose it. Social media will choose it. Old worries from yesterday will choose it. And once that first state is set, everything else follows. Your focus follows it. Your decisions follow it. Your patience follows it. Your reactions follow it. Then later in the day, you wonder why you feel scattered, irritated, anxious, or unfocused. You try to fix your behavior after the damage has already started. But the source was not the meeting, the traffic, the message, or the person who annoyed you. The source was the dialogue running inside you before anything happened. You cannot build discipline on a distracted mind. You cannot create clarity from a mind that was never directed. And you cannot build a strong day on an unstable foundation. That is why discipline must come first, before the phone, before the noise, before the world gets a vote, because words are instructions. When you speak to yourself in the morning, you are not just describing your reality. You are shaping it. You are telling your mind what to focus on, what to ignore, and how to interpret what comes next. If you begin with control, your mind looks for stability. If you begin with fear, your mind searches for danger. If you begin with purpose, your mind organizes around direction. So before the world tells you what to think, pause, take one breath. Ask yourself, what do I want my mind to obey today? Because the first voice you listen to in the morning often becomes the voice that leads your entire day. If you begin your morning with purpose, your mind starts organizing itself around direction. Simple words create powerful structure because they become the lens through which you experience everything that follows. Think about your own life for a moment. How many times have you reacted too quickly? How many small situations turned into bigger problems not because they were serious, but because your mind was already tense, distracted, or negative before they even happened? That reaction was not caused by the situation. It was caused by the system inside you. A system trained over time to expect the worst, to defend instead of understand, to react instead of pause. And that system was not built in one moment. It was built through repetition, through thoughts you allowed every day without questioning them until they became automatic. When something becomes automatic, it feels real. It feels like this is just who I am. But the truth is, it is still a choice. You just stopped seeing it as one. And the moment you become aware of that, you gain power again. Because you realize you do not need to control everything around you. You only need to control what happens first inside you. That is the real leverage point. Not in the middle of stress, not when emotions are already high, but before all of that begins. Because once emotions take over, you are no longer leading your actions. You are reacting to them. Most people wait until they feel overwhelmed before trying to fix their mindset. They try to calm down after anxiety has already taken control. They try to focus after hours of distraction. And that is why they keep failing. Because they are trying to take control too late. The Stoic approach is different. It prepares before the pressure arrives. It builds a stable mind before the day begins. This is not about motivation. It is about structure. A trained mind does not depend on feeling ready. It depends on what has been repeated enough times to become its default state. And that repetition always starts with something simple. What you say to yourself at the beginning of your day. You do not need more information. You do not need more complexity. You need consistency. A few clear, intentional statements repeated every morning can change your life more than hours of passive learning. Because information alone does not change behavior. Repetition does. What you repeat becomes how you think. How you think becomes how you act. And how you act becomes who you are. This pattern is always running whether you notice it or not. Which means your mind is already being shaped every single day. The real question is, are you shaping it? Or are you letting everything else shape it for you? Because if you are not intentional, then you are being directed. And if you are being directed, then you are not in control. This is why your words matter more than you think. They are not just thoughts passing through your mind. They are training instructions. Once you understand this, you stop speaking to yourself casually. You stop allowing random thoughts to dominate your mind. And you begin using your mind as a tool. A tool that prepares you for challenges. A tool that stabilizes you under pressure. A tool that shapes how you respond to everything life brings. Most people believe they lose control during the day. But the truth is they lose it at the very beginning. They wake up and immediately look for stimulation instead of awareness. They check their phone before they check their own mind. And in that small habit, they give away control of their attention, their emotions, and their direction. From that moment on, they are not leading their day. They are reacting to it. The first thing they consume is not chosen with intention. It is noise. Breaking news designed to create urgency. Notifications designed to pull attention. Social media designed to trigger comparison and distraction. All of it enters their mind before they have a chance to stabilize. Before they decide who they want to be that day. Before they set any direction for themselves. And once that happens, the mind is no longer neutral. It is already influenced, already biased, already pulled away from control. This is where the real problem begins, not in the events that happen later, but in the state that was created at the very start. Because once your mind is filled with noise, it begins to operate differently. You become reactive instead of intentional, scattered instead of focused, emotional instead of stable, and every decision you make carries that hidden influence. Even if you are not aware of it, you think you are responding to life, but in reality you are responding from a conditioned state, a state that was shaped just minutes after you woke up. And because this pattern repeats every single day, it becomes invisible. It feels normal. It feels like life is just stressful or overwhelming. But the truth is something much deeper. You are reinforcing the same mental chaos every morning, and then wondering why your life never feels clear or in control. On Stoicism Breath, this is where everything begins. Not by changing the world around you, but by taking back control of what enters your mind first. Because the way you start your morning quietly determines the way you live your entire day. The mind always follows what it is fed first. If the first thing you give it is urgency, it will start scanning for problems. If the first thing you give it is comparison, it will start searching for what is missing. If the first thing you give it is distraction, it will struggle to stay focused for the rest of the day. Think about how this plays out in real life. You wake up and immediately see stressful news. Your brain begins looking for threats. You scroll through social media and suddenly your life feels behind. You check messages and feel pressure before you even begin your day. Nothing actually happened yet, but your state has already changed. And once that state is set, it creates momentum. You are no longer just dealing with the day in front of you. You are dealing with the direction you created at the very beginning. Most people try to fix this later. They try to be productive after hours of distraction. They try to feel calm after feeding their mind anxiety. They try to focus after breaking their attention into pieces. But control does not work that way. Once your attention is scattered, it takes real energy to bring it back. And most people do not have the discipline to keep doing that over and over again. So the cycle continues. Wake up, consume noise, lose control, react all day, feel exhausted, repeat. At first it just feels like a busy life. Then it starts to feel normal. Always moving, always doing something, but never feeling clear or in control. And here is the deeper problem. Many people think they lack discipline. They think they need more motivation. But that is not the real issue. The real issue is direction. They never took control of the starting point. They let the outside world decide how their mind should feel. And then, they expected themselves to override that later. That strategy never works. Because once your mind is trained to react, it will keep reacting until something interrupts the pattern. This is why mornings matter so much. Not because they are magical, but because they are decisive. They decide whether you will live with intention or reaction, whether you will lead your mind or follow whatever enters it first. Most people never make that decision consciously. They drift into the day, and then spend the rest of it trying to recover control they already gave away. On Stoicism Breath, the perspective is simple and direct. You cannot control everything outside you, but you can control what happens inside you. The challenge is timing. You have to act before the world acts on you. Because once external input takes over your thinking, you are no longer choosing your state. You are managing it. And managing is always weaker than choosing. If you do not define your thoughts, something else will define them. If you do not set your focus, something else will take it. If you do not decide your state, the world will decide it for you. And the world is not designed to protect your clarity. It is designed to capture your attention. It pulls you toward urgency. It pulls you toward comparison. It pulls you toward distraction. All of it keeps you engaged but not in control. So the real problem is not that life is chaotic. The real problem is that most people enter that chaos unprepared. They start the day with an untrained mind, and still expect to perform with clarity and control. They begin from reaction and hope to reach control later. And that is why they stay stuck. Control is not something you find later in the day. It is something you establish at the beginning. If you fail to do that, you will spend the rest of your day trying to recover what you already lost. That is the cost of an unguarded morning. Not just wasted time, but lost direction. Not just distraction, but a weakened state of mind. And when this repeats every day, it begins to shape who you are. You slowly become someone who reacts instead of someone who leads. And over time, that pattern feels like your identity. But it always starts the same way, with a moment most people ignore. The moment you wake up. The moment your mind is still clear. The moment where you still have full control. And the moment most people give away without even thinking. At the same time, many people are trying to control things that were never theirs to control. They try to control outcomes. They try to control other people. They try to control timing and results. And when those things do not go their way, they feel frustrated, anxious, and powerless. But the problem is not reality. The problem is misunderstanding. Because control does not exist where most people are looking for it. As long as you chase control outside yourself, you will feel unstable inside. This is where the Stoic principle becomes powerful. There are only two categories in life. What is within your control, and what is outside of it? Within your control are your thoughts, your judgments, your choices, your responses. Outside of your control is almost everything else. Other people, opinions, their behavior, the past, the future, outcomes, and timing. Once you truly understand this line, everything changes. Because instead of wasting energy fighting the world, you begin mastering the only place where real power exists. Your own mind. Every time you bring your attention back to what you can actually control, something powerful begins to happen. You strengthen a part of your mind that most people never train. At first it feels small. Just a moment where you pause instead of react. A moment where you choose your response instead of letting emotion take over. But over time those moments add up. And slowly you begin to notice something different. You are less affected by chaos. Less shaken by unexpected problems. More grounded in your decisions. Not because life suddenly became easier, but because you became stronger in the way you face it. This is the kind of control most people misunderstand. Control is not about forcing life to go your way. It is not about making everything predictable or perfect. Real control is the ability to remain steady when things are uncertain, to stay clear when everything around you feels confusing, to hold your state even when the world is moving in ways you did not expect. And that kind of control does not come from outside. It is built from within. On Stoicism Breath, this is where the real work begins. Through discipline, through awareness, through repeated choice. Every time you choose to focus on what you can control, every time you let go of what you cannot, you are training your mind. And eventually that shift changes everything. You stop wasting energy on things that will never respond to your effort. And you start investing fully in what actually moves your life forward. Your actions, your mindset, your response. And this alone creates a clear separation between those who feel constantly overwhelmed and those who remain calm under pressure. Because one group is trying to control everything, and the other is mastering the only thing that was ever theirs. Most people believe change requires something complicated. More knowledge, more strategies, more time. But that belief is exactly what keeps them stuck. Because the mind does not change through complexity. It changes through repetition. It is not what you understand that defines you. It is what you repeat every single day. If your thoughts are random, your results will feel inconsistent. If your focus changes constantly, your life will feel unstable. This is why so many people consume endless information. They watch videos, read books, listen to advice. But nothing really changes. Because they are collecting ideas, but they are not installing them. And without installation, nothing becomes part of who you are. The Stoic approach is different. It does not overload your mind. It simplifies it. It reduces everything down to a few core principles that you can repeat every single day, not as temporary motivation, but as structure, not as a short emotional boost, but as long-term conditioning. Because the goal is not to feel inspired for a moment. The goal is to reprogram how you think. And to do that, you need something simple enough to repeat, and strong enough to hold when life becomes difficult. This is where the 5 statements come in, not as empty affirmations, but as commands. Instructions you give your mind before the world has a chance to influence it. Each one targets a specific weakness, the tendency to react too quickly, the desire to avoid discomfort, the habit of distraction, the need for validation, and the illusion of control. And together they create a system that stabilizes your mind before anything external begins. The first reminds you that you control your response. No matter what happens, you still have a choice. This removes helplessness and replaces it with power. The second teaches you to see discomfort as growth. Instead of something to escape, it becomes something that builds you. The third brings your attention back to the present moment, cutting off regret and anxiety, and forcing your focus onto what you can actually act on. The fourth stabilizes your sense of self. It removes the constant need for approval and frees you from comparison. The fifth teaches you to release control over what was never yours: outcomes, other people, timing. And by letting go of these things, you remove anxiety and replace it with calm focus. Each statement is simple, but together they create structure. They replace chaotic thinking with intentional thinking. They replace automatic reactions with conscious choices. And this is not about saying words and hoping something changes. This is about training your mind through repetition until these patterns become automatic, until your default reaction becomes calm, your default thinking becomes clear, and your default state becomes stable. Most people do not fail because they are incapable. They fail because they are inconsistent. They try something once or twice and expect a completely different life. But the mind does not work that way. It changes through repeated exposure. Just like negative thinking became automatic through repetition, controlled thinking is built the same way. The only difference is this: are you repeating these patterns by accident, or are you repeating them by design? When you choose to repeat these principles every morning, you are not trying to convince yourself of something new. You are building a system that shapes how you think, how you act, and how you respond. And over time, that system becomes who you are. You are not just repeating words, you are installing a system inside your mind. A system that decides in advance how you will think, how you will respond, and what you will focus on. So when real situations appear, you are not starting from zero. You are not guessing what to do or reacting blindly. You are operating from something already built. And that is what gives you stability under pressure. Think about the difference. Without structure, every challenge feels new. Every problem feels overwhelming. Every reaction feels automatic. But with structure, something shifts. You may not control what happens, but you control how you meet it. And over time, that changes everything. Not overnight. Not in one dramatic moment, but slowly, steadily, permanently. On Stoicism Breath, this is the difference between motivation and conditioning. Motivation comes and goes. You feel strong one day and lost the next. But conditioning stays. It becomes part of how you think without effort. And the only way to build that is through repetition. The same words, the same focus, the same direction, every single day. Until one day you realize you are no longer reminding yourself. Because this is simply how you think now. That is the real purpose of these 5 statements. Not to inspire you for a moment, but to stabilize you over time. Not to make you feel better temporarily, but to make you stronger consistently. They are not quick fixes. They are tools. Tools that change how you face your problems. And once your approach changes, something interesting happens. The problems themselves lose power. Because it was never just the problem. It was how you were meeting it. Your mind is shaped by what it hears most often. So if you do not choose your inputs carefully, they will be chosen for you. And most of the time, they will not serve you. That is why instead of leaving your thinking to chance, you simplify it. You reduce it to something repeatable, something reliable, something effective. Something you can return to every morning, before anything else enters your mind. Because once your mind is set correctly at the beginning, everything that follows becomes easier to manage. Not because life is easier, but because you are no longer unstable inside it. Control begins with one decision. Not what happens to you, but how you respond to it. And most people never make that decision consciously. They react automatically, driven by habit, emotion, and past conditioning. They let situations decide how they feel. And the moment they do that, they lose their power. Because reaction without awareness is weakness, but response with intention is strength. This is the first major shift. You move from being controlled by events to directing your behavior regardless of those events. When you say, "I choose my response," you are not denying reality. You are redefining your role in it. You are reminding yourself that there is always a space, a small gap between what happens and what you do next. And inside the gap is control. Not control over the situation, but control over your interpretation and your action. That is the only place where real power exists. If you lose that, everything else controls you. Every inconvenience changes your mood. Every setback changes your direction. And that is how people lose control of their lives. Not in one big moment, but in small reactions repeated every day. Most people never train this gap. They collapse it. Something happens, and they react instantly. No pause, no awareness, no choice. And over time, that becomes their identity. Someone who is easily triggered, easily distracted, easily thrown off balance. Not because life is harder, but because they never built control where it matters most. The moment before reaction. Once you begin to see this clearly, everything changes. You realize the problem is not the situation. The problem is the lack of space between stimulus and response. And that space can be trained. Every time you pause instead of react, you strengthen it. Every time you choose your response instead of following emotion, you reinforce it. And over time, that pause becomes natural. Not something you force, but something that defines how you operate. And when that happens, something powerful emerges. Situations lose their ability to control you, because your state no longer depends on them. But control alone is not enough, because even when you manage your response, you can still resist what is happening, and resistance creates tension. This is where the second shift begins. Growth. Growth does not happen when things are easy. It happens when things are uncomfortable. Yet most people spend their lives trying to avoid discomfort. They feel pressure and assume something is wrong. They feel uncertainty and assume they are failing. But what if that discomfort is not a problem? What if it is the exact place where you are supposed to grow? And the moment you begin to see discomfort differently, you stop running from it and start using it. That is where real change begins. Most people reach a moment of discomfort and immediately think, this is where I should stop. But that interpretation is exactly what keeps them stuck. Because the moment you say growth lives here, everything changes. Discomfort is no longer a warning sign. It becomes a signal that you are being pushed beyond your current limits. A signal that something inside you is being stretched. And that stretch is where real development begins. Think about any area of your life where you have grown. It was never in comfort. It was never when everything felt easy and familiar. Growth always required effort. It required challenge. It required pressure. And the moment you truly accept that, you stop running away from the very thing that can change you. On Stoicism Breath, this is one of the most important shifts you can make. Because most people quit at the exact point where growth begins. They feel resistance and assume something is wrong. They feel uncertainty and assume they are not capable. They feel discomfort and immediately want to go back to what feels safe. But what feels safe is often what is keeping them stuck. Every time you choose comfort over growth, you reinforce the same limits, the same patterns, the same version of yourself. Growth demands something different. It asks you to stay present even when things feel uncomfortable. It asks you to keep moving even when you are not sure. It asks you to act without waiting for everything to feel right. And this is where control and growth come together. Because without control, you will escape discomfort too quickly. And without discomfort, your growth will never be tested. When you combine both, you create a powerful system inside yourself. You choose your response, so you do not collapse under pressure. And you accept discomfort, so you can expand beyond your limits. This removes two of the biggest weaknesses most people struggle with: reacting without thinking, and avoiding anything that feels hard. And in their place, you build stability and progress. You are no longer pushed around by events. And you are no longer running away from challenges. Instead, something shifts in how you experience life. Problems stop feeling like obstacles. They become training. Pressure stops feeling like something to avoid. It becomes an opportunity. Setbacks stop defining who you are. They become information that helps you improve. Over time, this creates a different kind of confidence. Not the fragile kind that depends on everything going well, but a steady confidence that comes from knowing you can handle what comes. Because now you understand something most people miss. You control your response. And growth is always on the other side of discomfort. Most people want results without discomfort. and control without discipline. But those things cannot exist together. Strength is not built in comfort. It is built through repetition under pressure. And the more you expose yourself to challenge while staying in control, the stronger you become, not just in what you can do, but in how you think. So when you begin your day with these principles, you are not just preparing for an easy day, you are preparing for a difficult one. You are deciding in advance. No matter what happens, I will choose my response, and I will not run from growth. And that decision changes everything, because now you are not hoping the day goes well. You are ready if it does not. And when you are ready for difficulty, it loses its power over you, because you stop avoiding it and start using it. There is another hidden cost most people never notice. They are not losing their life in one dramatic moment. They are losing it slowly, by living everywhere except the present. Their mind is stuck in the past, replaying mistakes, regrets, missed chances, or it is lost in the future, worrying about outcomes that have not even happened. And while all of that is happening, the only moment where real action is possible is being ignored. That is the true cost of not controlling your attention. Not just distraction, but disconnection. Disconnection from the only place where change can actually happen. Right now, most people underestimate how much their life can change from something so simple, because it feels too easy to matter. But that is exactly why it works. Simplicity is powerful when it is applied consistently. When you bring your focus back to today again and again, you begin to build momentum. And momentum changes everything. Think about it this way. A small action done with full attention every day is far more powerful than a big plan that is never executed. A short walk completed, a focused hour of work finished, a clear decision made. These small actions seem insignificant in the moment, but over time they compound, and slowly they turn into real measurable progress. On Stoicism Breath, this is how the Stoic mindset approaches life. Each day is not something to survive. It is something to use. Each day is a complete unit, and how you use it shapes everything that comes after. If you waste today, you cannot go back and recover it. But if you use it well, you build something that carries forward into tomorrow. This removes one of the biggest illusions people live with, the idea that life will start later. It will not. Life is not waiting in the future. It is happening now, or it is not happening at all. So when you wake up and remind yourself that today matters most, you are setting a boundary for your attention. You are making a decision. You will not waste your energy on things you cannot control. You will not invest your focus in things that do not move your life forward. Instead, you place it where it matters. Your actions, your focus, your decisions. And that decision creates stability, because your mind is no longer scattered between past and future. It is grounded in the present. This is where control becomes real, not as an idea, but as something you practice, because every action you take today is within your reach. Every decision you make today shapes your direction, and every moment you stay present strengthens your ability to act with clarity. Most people are waiting for the perfect future to finally change, but that moment never arrives, because the future does not come all at once. It comes one day at a time, and if you cannot control one day, you cannot control your life. That is why today matters most. Not because it is the only day that exists, but because it is the only day you can actually use. And when you learn to use it fully, something shifts inside you. You stop feeling behind. You stop feeling overwhelmed. And you begin to move with clarity, because you are no longer trying to live in multiple timelines. You are exactly where your power is, right here in this moment. There is another layer most people never question. They measure their worth based on outcomes, based on approval, based on comparison. And that is why their state is always unstable. When things go well, they feel strong. When things do not, they feel less. So they keep chasing a version of themselves that finally feels enough. But that feeling never lasts, because anything built on validation can be taken away at any moment. And living like that creates constant pressure. Pressure to prove, pressure to perform, pressure to be accepted, until one simple shift changes everything. When you say I am enough, you are not saying you are perfect. You are removing dependency. You are deciding that your value does not rise and fall with results. You are choosing not to negotiate your identity with the world. And that changes how you move through life. You stop performing just to be approved. You stop shrinking to avoid judgment. You stop exhausting yourself trying to fit expectations that were never yours. Instead, you begin to act from a place that is already stable. And when that happens, your actions become clearer, your decisions become stronger, and your life begins to move in a direction that is truly your own. You begin to act from a place that is already stable, not because your life is perfect, but because you no longer need it to be. That shift changes everything. You stop reacting to every small change. You stop depending on everything going your way just to feel okay. Instead, you move with clarity. You speak more directly. You say what you mean without overthinking. You set boundaries without hesitation. And you start choosing what truly aligns with you, not what impresses other people. On Stoicism Breath, this is where a different kind of confidence is built. It is not loud. It is not forced. It does not need attention. It is quiet, steady, and real, because it is not based on how the world sees you. It is based on how you see yourself. But even with that clarity, there is still one place where people lose control. The need to control everything. The need to control outcomes. The need to control timing. The need to control how life unfolds. You make plans. You push harder. You try to force things into place. And when reality does not match your expectations, you feel tension, not because the situation is impossible, but because you are resisting it. This is where another powerful shift begins. When you say, "I release control," you are not giving up. You are letting go of what was never yours. You can control your effort. You can control your actions. You can control your consistency. But you cannot control the final result. And the moment you accept that, something inside you becomes lighter. You stop fighting what you cannot change. And you focus fully on what you can. That removes a weight you did not even realize you were carrying. Trying to control everything feels like strength. But it is not. It drains your energy. It creates frustration. It ties your peace to outcomes that are never guaranteed. Letting go is not weakness. It is precision. You act fully where you have influence. And you release everything else. That is where stability is created. Now something powerful begins to happen. When your sense of value comes from within, you no longer need results to prove yourself. And when you no longer need results, it becomes easier to let them go. You act because it is right, because it aligns with who you are, not because it guarantees success. And this removes fear, because failure no longer defines you. It teaches you. It informs you. It helps you grow. You stop living in constant tension. You stop needing everything to go perfectly just to feel stable. Instead, you become steady even when things are uncertain, not because life becomes predictable, but because you are no longer dependent on it being predictable. And that is where real strength appears, not when things are easy, but when they are not. When you bring all of these principles together, something deeper changes. You choose your response instead of reacting. You accept discomfort instead of avoiding it. You focus on today instead of being pulled into past and future. You ground your value instead of chasing validation. You release control instead of resisting reality. And this creates more than a mindset. It creates a system, a way of operating that stays with you. This is how real change happens, not from one decision, but from repetition. The same principles practiced every day, until they become natural, until you no longer need to remind yourself, because this is simply how you think, and how you act. Life does not suddenly become easier, but you become harder to shake. You are no longer controlled by what happens. You are defined by how you respond to it. And that is the difference that changes everything. Not what happens in your life, but who you are when it does. Your mind is always listening, always shaping itself around what you repeat. So if you choose these principles every day, they will shape you in return, not overnight, but consistently. And that consistency builds real control. Everything begins the same way, with what you say to yourself at the start of the day. And when you choose those words with intention, and repeat them with discipline, you build something most people never reach, a mind that is steady, clear, and fully under your control.